Martin Gurri, thank you so much for joining me.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, pleasure to have you. You have, in your recent book, Revolt of the Public, you wrote, well, recent, it was back in 2014, you wrote about the reign of what you called Homo informaticus, which is just information man who has a significant amount of information available at his fingertips, and that we are currently living in a regime that is ruled by Homo informaticus, this information man. Do you see an end to the reign of Homo informaticus?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't say that we're being ruled by Homo informaticus. I think we're being disrupted by him. Um, and I think it's a term that doesn't really make sense to most people because we've grown up as Homo informaticus. We are the fish in that ocean who don't see the water. We can't feel the water. But I'm telling you, as a man who, as you can tell, is not particularly young, I as recently as say 1980, the 80s, you could go to a country like Egypt, not the most primitive country in the world, and have almost no media. I mean, almost no media. Television was an hour or two of Al Mubarak all the time. So not only was it short and brief, but boring. And the newspapers were the elites talking to each other on their very, very limited conditions. So the vast majority of the population was either illiterate or functionally illiterate, in the sense that they might read words, but they did not inform themselves by reading newspapers or watching television. Um, and that was the natural condition of the human animal. That's the way we all evolved. We knew a lot about our village. We knew everything about who was on our side and who was against us. You know, the good boss man, the bad boss man, the good wife, the bad wife, the good husband, the bad, all these things we knew intimately and deeply. Beyond that, we knew virtually nothing, right? Virtually
Mhm.
nothing. And
Right.
in Egypt, what broke that up, interesting, was not the internet, it was satellite TV. And it wasn't just Al Jazeera coming in suddenly, Al Jazeera hated Mubarak, right? So suddenly,
Yeah.
this guy who we basically were expected to treat as Pharaoh and probably had no objection to that is the villain of the piece. He's the bad guy, the super villain. And I can only imagine. And of course, there were um, all these Western movies without any censorship. These people were being exposed to ways of life that they had no conception existed. And then, of course, behind that came the internet. Homo informaticus is where we are today. You and I are part of it. That it describes our species, but it is not what the human race has mostly been. And if you are a government and you base your power on legitimacy, it's basically always easier for me to have you say yes when I tell you to do something than to have to point a gun at you and say do it or else, right? So
Right.
legitimacy and authority just mean that you buy into the fact that I'm in charge for whatever reasons. And I have a story that I give you that these are the reasons. Probably that I am wiser and more experienced and I know the world and you just live in your little village. Um, Suddenly you start to look at alternatives. No, look, this country over here doesn't run itself the way we do. And there was these, movements over here that were kind of erupting against a dictator kind of like ours. And all of a sudden you become aware of all these possibilities. And if you are a ruling government, and you don't have to be Hosni Mubarak, you can be a perfectly democratically elected leader.
Right.
Um, and your story just disintegrates because there's always a better alternative. There's always something to be angry about. There's always failure to be explained away. And Homo informaticus is essentially a force of negation. Yeah, I won't say that he rules. I would say that he makes it impossible to rule. So we're kind of
Yeah.
stuck at that moment right now.
And the reason that Homo informaticus makes it impossible for a government to rule, not rule by force, but rule by intellectual legitimacy, is because of the amount of information that they can use to disprove the government's justifying story. Is that correct?
Right. There is always a narrative. I mean, human beings essentially we all live on narratives. There's a
Hmm.
story inside your head, Jackson, that you tell yourself about yourself. And then you tell yourself about the people around you. And it goes all the way up to cosmic, right? You may believe in God or may believe in some, vast cosmic universe. And somehow or another, these are nested narratives that direct your action. Sometimes
Right.
you can say they justify it more than direct it, but it's an interaction. Sometimes you act because of the ideas in the narrative. Sometimes you act and try to justify with a narrative. With government is both, right? So it becomes we are living through essentially an extinction event for narratives. All right,
Hmm.
they are just dying. And that is true whether it's religion. Organized religions are having trouble keeping their flocks. It's true whether you're a government, whether you're a dictatorship or not. The dictators always says, make the trains run on time. But no, we know that you don't now. Or if you're a democratic elected person and you go like, I care about the people. I care about, no. You were out there hobnobbing with Epstein or something. We know about you now. So
Right.
so all these stories disintegrate. All the stories disintegrate. And it's kind of at the end, I think your personal story starts to disintegrate because you have nothing to hang it on. And it's kind of like a civilizational psychotic event, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we're kind of undergoing a kind of a psychotic event as we transition from what used to be to whatever is next.
Interesting. Now, is it possible to have a legitimizing or justifying story that is um, true or accurate or something like that that would kind of be a barrier against, the information surge that's happened?
I mean, I haven't seen it yet. Let's put it that way. I think
Right.
theoretically it's totally possible. I think what it has to be, which is what politicians hate to do, is very humble. In other words, the old narratives came from the industrial age, and the industrial age had this belief that they knew what they were doing. It's all about science. It's all about reason. It's all about technology. I'm the guy who got the PhD and all those things. You have to shut up and let me do my job. All right.
Right.
And of course, that only works if you do your job, or if you fail to do your job, and people are either ignorant of your failure or they can't talk back. Right? I mean,
Right.
you claim victory, and everybody's seeing you lose. But in the old days, all you could do was scream at the television, maybe, right? Write a letter to the
Right.
whatever. Whereas now, okay, we are all talking back. It's an roar of voices talking back to the elites, and they're terrified and they hate it, right? So,
Yeah.
so I think the old industrial age idea that you are in command, the whole of society is like this gigantic factory floor, and you are doing scientific management, you're like a social engineer, is blown up. You can't do that anymore. I think
Right.
theoretically you could live in a world in which the story is constantly evolving by not pretending that you have platonic truth. You're just saying, okay, or that you have solutions. A word I hate, by the way. In politics, listen to politicians. They have solutions to problems. All right,
Mm.
it's like a mathematical equation, right? Um,
Right.
most of these problems are conditions, say poverty or inequality. It's not a problem; it's a condition, right?
Yeah.
So all you have to do is use the right words. I mean, you see elements of it. And people like Trump, for example, who doesn't talk like a politician, he talks like kind of a crazy person. But
He talks like a New York guy.
but in a way, that's you go like, well, that's not like a string of jargon like you get from
Yeah.
a Hillary Clinton say. Um,
Right.
so just as one side, you need somebody who talks to you in ways that you are going to listen because you feel like this guy's like pontificating at me. They're actually he's talking to me, but you need to have something to say that's worth listening to. Uh,
Right.
and I'm not sure Trump fits that role particularly. But what you have to say is humble. Like there, of course, Trump, no. Okay,
Right.
you have to say, I think the best way to go will be this, but we should, and every policy should be created, should be established with like nodes in it, where you go like at this node, We decide whether this is the right direction, and if it's not, then we will try this. And in this node, we will see where we are. But follow me. I've got ideas, but I need your help. I need you guys versus just sit back, be good boys and girls, and I will solve the problem. And
Yeah.
different rhetoric.
Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. So it sounds like, I mean, part of it is honesty, that they have to be honest about, no, we can solve this problem. We can't solve this problem. These are the things that we
Fundamental,
can do and can't do.
fundamental, profound honesty. Honestly, you could probably fib about little things. More likely, you can be wrong about even big things. Okay, but
Right.
as long as you have prepared the public that you're not infallible, you're not the Pope, you're not sitting
Right.
solving equations and everything goes great. You are with them as their representative, which is something that gets lost a lot. As their representative, I embody your desires to improve life in X, Y, or Z way, and these are
Hmm.
the policies I'm putting in place, and these are the benchmarks where we're going to stop and think and ask ourselves, is this working? What's the data, right?
Right.
And we're going to share that with you, and we're going to then have a thought whether to continue or not. And then everybody feels like they're participating in the process as opposed to just being told from the top.
Hmm. Interesting. And so, um, does that yield better outcomes, or do we know?
Well, as somebody said about Christianity, it hasn't been tried yet. um, so we don't know.
Interesting. Now, how much of this has removed the power of the authorities? In other words, I'm thinking like, they no longer have, obviously, they don't have the same authority that someone like Lincoln or Reagan had in their time, where it was just kind of like everyone revered them as obviously the person to look up to, almost, a godlike status, even though we realized they were mortal. Um, but it seems like that no longer exists. Do they still have any power, or is the power really, in a very, in a real sense, just the people's?
They have great power with the structures we um, basically inhabit today are 20th century structures, and they are totally top down, and they can give the person at the very top of the pyramid tremendous power. What they don't have is that sense by the public that they are special and that we are rooting for them. And I mean, I wouldn't use Reagan or Lincoln, who were both kind of you know semi decent human beings, but I mean, somebody like John F. Kennedy, who was probably a decent human being in other ways, but was a complete girl crazy person, a woman crazy person, right?
Right.
I mean, apparently, for what they say, it was obsessive, and everybody knew it. All the other heads of state knew it. All the media knew it. Everybody knew it. I didn't know it. People in the street didn't know it because he was protected.
Right.
He was protected. His authority, he was hedged by an authority because he was president and young and whatnot, that they wanted to protect him. Now it's the opposite. You get elected to the presidency. And by the way, you always use the example I did in the book of the Bay of Pigs invasion, which was a disaster. Practically the
Yes.
first major decision that Kennedy made. Um, Barely, I think, maybe he's still into his first 100 days or barely out of it. And it was a silly decision, and it went bad. And immediately afterwards, his approval rate went up 10 points to about
Hmm.
80%, by the way. So,
Wow.
yeah. So we were rooting for him. When he failed, we wanted him to succeed, okay? Whereas now you get elected, and the minute you walk into the White House, at least 50% of the population hates you for being there, all right?
All
And,
right.
starts accusing you of everything from, God knows what,
Yeah.
pederasty and corruption and whatever. And it doesn't stop the 4 years you're there. It just gets worse.
Interesting. Now, is that a is that a result of a wealthy society who doesn't have immediate problems on their hands. In other words, like if we went to war and it was very clear that there was an enemy right in front of us, let's say we were being invaded, would that desire to undermine the justifying story of the regime turn off, or at least dim for a little bit as we focused on something that was an immediate problem?
Um, that's a good question. I mean, I think you can answer it both ways. The Israelis have existential questions that they have to answer every day.
Right.
Literally, people die if you answer it the wrong way. And they have the same problems we have, all right? They do not have that bond. When the war is on, they bond together, but politically, they have that gigantic split, and the two sides hate each other, and they call each other names just like we do. Francis Fukuyama, in The End of History, and the second part of the title everybody forgets, and The Last Man, which is a concept he borrowed from Nietzsche. The last man is the person who's still around after all conflicts have been solved, all affluence has been achieved, and basically it's a person who's looking for to pick a fight because life is too boring otherwise, right? You're just picking a fight to fight,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So you can make that case of what is going on right now. I think Fukuyama, he gets laughed at a lot because of the end of history thing, but everything he said, I think, came out more or less true in the terms that he defined it. And The Last Man, I think there's a lot of what happens in our society today. These are, we would paint, for example, the Zoomers as these pathetic people who suffered during the 2008 downturn, the crisis, and who are terrified of this and terrified. I mean, look at the statistic. They're the best educated, wealthiest at their age generation in the history of the human race. Okay, so it seems like succeeding materially and becoming psychotic, as I said, tends to go hand in hand. I don't understand that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a phrase in I believe it's Judges in the Bible, and it says Jeshurun waxed fat and kicked. I feel like is a
That's
good
cool.
description of what's going on right now.
Yep.
We've waxed fat and are beginning to kick. I think
Yep.
was it Dostoevsky that was like, if ever all the problems were solved and we could just sit around and drink martinis and continue, as he put it, busy ourselves with the continuation of the species, we'd tear it all apart in 5 minutes just for something to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Nietzsche had that idea too with The Last Man, which
Yeah.
he despised.
Yeah. So is it possible to build a regime given that we now, like, I don't know if there is an end to to Homo informaticus, if there's a new stage that humanity will grow into. Is it possible to build a true regime in this time where, like, everything and its source code can be doubted?
Yeah, build is a degree of intentionality that I'm not sure you can achieve over this gigantic question, right? I think it works out a little bit like the way market prices happen. Some people buy, some people don't buy, and so
Yeah.
markets rise and fall, and in the end, a system will gel together. Nobody put the industrial system together. There was no single person or little team of geniuses that said, let's take this old-fashioned 18th century republic and turn it into a mass democracy. Nobody said that, but it kind of happened, right? And nobody's going to take the mass democracy and say, well, let's take this monster and make it into, a digitized, AI-driven,
Right.
democratic, hopefully, democratic entity. But I think it can happen. In fact, I think the democratic part is I won't say it's certain. That's the part that some of us are fighting for, of course. But that there will be a moment of coalescence, right, where the institutions and the technology, particularly the communication structures, gel together into a single form. I think that will happen. It's inevitable. It's happened every time in history. The institutions going to look very different. They'll be flatter and faster, and they will be either totally opaque, or because that can happen, or they will be quite the opposite. They'll be totally transparent. You can do both those things with AI.
Yeah.
It will happen. I think it will happen, and I guess, and I've never doubted that. And I guess what we need to think about is what we want to conduct, to carry, what baggage we want to carry, in our little sacks from the old world to the new one.
Yeah. Was the old world better? I mean, I don't know if it's hard to put to use a standard to judge these two regimes. I don't know what would be the correct standard, but was the old regime, I don't know, better is just the best I got right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't pass value judgments. So if you're talking about better in terms of effective, I think at its prime, the industrial, you know, organization, the way of organizing humanity, the industrial model, was very effective. It accounted for um, communications technologies that had not been at the beginning of our foundation, like mass newspapers, like radio and television. It kind of absorbed them into a structure that put everybody in mass institution. You could be a mass consumer, a mass producer. You could be a part of the political parties were really mass movements. These enormous pyramids, which were just like a factory floor, if you believe in Taylor's scientific management or something like that. So it's turning the society to a gigantic factory floor, being scientifically managed by these very brilliant elites. Right? It worked. It was up to date
Yeah.
to its moment. I mean, it's the rule of what Walter Lippmann called specially trained man. The problem
Mm.
is, as society moves on and technology evolves, it became the top and society became more and more out of whack with each other. And right now, it's like, it's like this tectonic grinding of one against the other constantly.
Yeah. No, I think Eric Weinstein talks about when he was on a different podcast, and he was talking about the old regime that was kind of the post World War II um, regime that you're describing, where the elites of the society are the ones in charge, and they're the authorities everyone looks up to and kind of reveres, and they're the ones that make all the decisions from their ivory palaces. And he was making the point that they did, in fact, keep us from any sort of nuclear disaster. And so you have to give the devil its due. We developed nuclear weapons, but we didn't we didn't start bombing each other immediately. We dropped two on Japan, and then it kind of like we haven't dropped any more on each other. And he was like, you do have to give props to the old regime for all its flaws, for not for keeping us out of that danger, because that would have been really quite awful, and kind of started us over from ground zero, and also a real possibility.
Well, I mean, and it defeated two very attractive totalitarian systems. Right?
Yeah,
Everybody
yeah,
thinks Nazis are horrible, and nobody can imagine anybody being appealed to by such a system. But in its day, National Socialism was a model. Latin America is
yeah,
always a bellwether. Latin America is always borrowing, right? And there were several regimes in Latin America that did flavors of National Socialism, and of course, Marxism-Leninism
hmm
was even more attractive because it was not nationalistic base. It was internationalistic. Um, and Democracy is always a mess. If you read the Peloponnesian War, the democracies are always at a disadvantage when at war or in conflict with united despotisms. And I mean, we beat them completely, right? We
yeah,
put them into the dust. I mean, I was there for the Cold War, and I can begin to tell you there were moments where it looked to me like I hope we can last long enough that I don't have to go. You know, I'm not here when we lose. You know, I mean, I was in the CIA, so
Right.
I was pretty up to date on what the hell was going on. And then
Yeah.
suddenly it turned. Suddenly it turned. Democracy also has a way of sort of regenerating itself, as despotism does not, right?
Hmm.
Or almost never. Um, and so we were, you know, protected from those two terrible systems. I am also Cuban, and I'm looking at what's going on in Cuba today. And you go like, Cuba, when Castro took over, had a higher GDP per capita than Japan. Okay, and
Hmm.
you measure those two things now, and you go, oh my God, if it could be 1/10 of Japan today, the Cubans will be dancing in the streets with happiness. You know, these are
Yeah.
destructive systems that somehow tell a good story, though, and
Yeah.
there are people to this day who think of Fidel Castro as being a heroic figure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's his Zoran Mamdani
Yeah.
in New York? Just I think it was just yesterday I saw that he was explaining how turns out they had to raid some of the reserves, the reserve capital because turns out his communist plan wasn't working very well without an enormous supply of other people's money. But it
That's
seems that we haven't.
literally what happens every time they eat the
Yeah.
corn seed. They eat the corn seed. Cuba was self-sustaining, for example, in beef. And of course, what they did was,
Really.
oh yeah, oh yeah. In fact, when I was a young boy, chicken was the luxury because it was not self-sustaining. So we got chicken from the U.S., but Cuban beef was domestic. And of course, they ate it all because they eat the corn seed. And today, literally, I mean, they were the greatest sugar exporters. They exported like at their height it was like 8 million tons of sugar every year, and
Yeah.
today they're importing sugar. They don't even have sugar
Man.
they can export. So I mean, they have no money. They have no foreign currency. They have nothing that they either grow or produce or build that they can sell to
Yeah.
the world, and yet they have to import all their energy and all their food. It's a disaster. It's terrible.
Yeah. How did they get to that point? Cuba specifically, and partly so that, we don't do the same thing.
Well, I mean, it's very simple. I mean, you basically, you know, communism, Marxism, Leninism is at the very top of what I was talking about before. It's like, there is a vanguard party of, like platonic guardians almost, who know everything. We are the ones who know. You people, we are doing everything on your behalf. And by the way, all those tricks that the so-called democracies used, they're lies. But they say they have elections. That's not really true. The corporations rig it so that all the people that they want get elected, and you as a voter get nothing. Whereas
Yeah.
we, and free speech, they control all the voices, they pay all the voices. So we, by being seemingly dictatorial, are actually acting on behalf of the little guy, the public. So it's a great story. The problem is, it is everywhere it's been tried. I mean, Venezuela, which had oil, for God's sakes, it wasn't sugar, it was oil. They
Yeah.
they ate that corn seed. It wasn't working anymore, and 8 million Venezuelans left the country. So I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. Cuba has lost like 10-15% of its population in the last 3 years. And the reason is, and it won't happen here because I think you need an authoritarian voice. That's what people
Hmm.
accuse Trump of being authoritarian. And the Cuban in me laughs. Um,
Yeah.
so I would say, um, you need property, you need rules, you need, rights, personal rights that protect you from the government. We have all those things.
Hmm. Right. And is it possible in this new regime? What things do we need to be watching for that would be an indicator that we're starting to lose those?
Well, I mean, the regime has not been established. I don't think I'm going to live to see it. You may, yeah, it's kind of, I'd say 50 years,
Okay.
maybe a little
I'll
less.
probably be around 70.
Yeah, so you'll be around. Um, so I, I, um, I think what the new regime has to watch, as opposed to what may happen, because I don't know, the future is in principle unknowable. What it has to
Yeah.
watch is the opposite of what the industrial model had to watch. The industrial model was too centralized, everything centralized, right?
Hmm.
The world had this kind of like everything was, you had the UN, you had the EU, everything got bigger and you kept adding things, right? And individual governments did the same thing. All things that had been responsibilities of the individual, or sometimes of local governments, or sometimes of state or provincial governments, they just got sucked up to the top, right? And that was, I think, the besetting sin of the industrial model. We are the engineers, and this whole thing is the factory floor, scientific management, and the rest of this, separation of powers thing is just gets in the way. Okay.
Hmm.
I think the new regime will have to watch the exact opposite. It's going to be very distributed. It's going to be very fragmented, probably very local, very fast, very flat. And I think it will have to always be watching out for disintegration. I think we're in a moment
Hmm.
of disintegration. I think there will be disintegration until everything coalesces again. I think we are in a moment of great disintegration. The EU, nobody thinks of, the Brits have left and several have left in spirit, if not in fact. Um, the United Nations is completely a nothing, right? It's a non-entity. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think there are many formerly aggregated Soviet Union broke into many pieces. Yugoslavia broke into many pieces. The Czechs and Slovaks, who I don't know what the difference is, but they seem to find the difference enough to split. The Sudan is split into about 800 countries. Africa is, like an amoeba that keeps splitting. Um,
Yeah.
right now, what we have is a process of disintegration at work in the world, and you can see government powers slowly going the same direction. So
Hmm.
the new regime, which will be when things stabilize, but stabilize at that flat level, you just have to watch all the time that just as in the old regime, you didn't want to over centralize. You don't want to lose control and basically have 50 different countries that are part of the United States and
Right.
hardly anything coming from the top that unifies them.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you think AI? How do you think AI is going to play into that conversation, especially with the rise of Homo informaticus and I don't know, information is just going to continue to become more and more readily available.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and the answer is who knows. But
Hmm.
but I would say just because you can get cosmic with AI real quick, and I think
You can.
not necessarily would be wrong to do that. But in a non-cosmic sense, I would say I was kind of fascinated with what the Doge under Musk, and then they still be doing it, but he talked about it all the time and then stopped talking. Or did with AI, right? Because it always had appeared to me that what we need to do with the government, the federal government, was a tremendous structural reconfiguration to make it flatter and faster. Um,
Mm.
but what AI did was a functional reconfiguration. In other words, suddenly you didn't have to change all the labyrinths. Believe me, if you're inside the government, it's like there are 8 things that do the same mission, all right? And
Right.
we're aware
Yeah.
of them, and you wonder why, but okay, somebody's going to have a job, I guess. But but you put AI on that, which is what the Doge did, and suddenly all those opaque things go to glass. They go transparent. You can see the government
Yeah.
top to bottom. You can be the president of the United States and say, have allocated $1 million for this bridge to be built over here. And now, thanks to AI, I can see, you know what? They were supposed to have started 3 months ago. They haven't started, or they're on time, or they're ahead of time. And the company that's doing it seems to be charging for. You can go from the microscopic to the gigantic in AI and get this transparency of what's going on, right? And so you can basically reconfigure a gigantic bureaucracy like the federal government structurally that's really hard. So that was always the part that I felt was, how is this going to happen? Right? It's like
Yeah.
taking the Great Pyramid and saying, I'm going to make it now, 3/4 flatter. I mean, try it. Okay. Um, but now you can reconfigure the government functionally. The point is not to change structures. The point is to make it move faster and to make it less opaque. So
Hmm.
I think um, for a fact, presidents are going to get that possibility. It puts great power in their hands again all of a sudden. And I think the only check against that would be much of this must be made public as well. You or I should be able to go on AI and look at that transparent bureaucracy and see who's spending the money how and who are these people. And I
Hmm.
think, part of what Musk did, I thought was very effective at the beginning of the Trump administration was they put out what our money was going to. They were crazy things. I mean, when you're talking about trillions of dollars, people are just kind of grabbing, oh, a million here, a million there. Who's going to even notice? And I've been inside, like I said, and it's a hard impulse to resist. But
Yeah, I bet.
if you are sitting there center stage with the lights on you and the audience is watching, you're going to be the most, uh, virtuous bureaucrat ever because there's payback if you're not. So
Right.
that's one way in which AI can influence things. Um,
Interesting. Now, how would um, regular citizens make a change? Um, let's say that we saw that the government was spending our money in a way that we really didn't like. Um, it feels like there's a lot they could get away with before we could actually produce any results that would slow that down or stop it.
oh, that's always true, and I think it it's additionally true when you have a long-standing system that's industrial model I've been talking about. Um, that just took it for granted nobody could peer into their windows. Just believed that
Right.
it was completely opaque to everybody. So it's all just all us good old boys sitting around a table, and we decide what happens. We're the smartest anyone. It's good for them that we're here. There's a sense that a tiny little amount of noblesse oblige and a gigantic amount of self-interest. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so uh, it's hard to counteract that, and
Yeah.
probably impossible 100%. But there's a lot that can be done. I mean, we vote, we buy, we sell, we communicate. I mean, we communicate all the time now, um, and it seems to me that again, not as an individual. I mean, some individuals, if you're the president, you have a lot of heft. Most of us don't. But again, it becomes more like the price system, right? Each one of them adds our own little purchasing power towards a much more aggregated emergent system. And you will find that you as one of that gigantic, group have a lot to say about who gets chosen. Um, you know, what actors do you follow on TV and the movies? What will you not ever look at? It's interesting that for like a good 5 years, Hollywood decided that everything it had done before, Disney was a champion of this. Everything it had done before was to be now completely trashed on behalf of some weird ideological notion where every
Right.
every hero who had been a guy suddenly became a black woman, and we had these little models with pencil arms punching out big beefy guys, and somehow they dropped to the ground.
I know.
you know? So
I know.
so you had that, but eventually people didn't go. The people were not biting. Nobody wanted to see that. Nobody believes that those
Yeah.
girls could beat those beefy guys. And I mean, hundreds and hundreds of millions were lost from that, and things are turning around, I believe. So it's not, none of us have one-on-one power to say kill that policy or get rid of that. Like both Trump and Biden had everybody to get rid of them, kill them, send them to jail, whatever. Oh, we can't do that. Once you elect them, they're there, okay? But you can, barricade their policies. You can condemn them. You can expose them. Um, and if enough other people do the same, it changes. It changes.
Yeah, it was funny. I saw a couple days ago someone tweeted about there's some new AI video generator that had made an action sequence between Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, and it was still like you could still tell it was AI. But we're getting to the point where like if you showed, if I showed my 90-year-old grandma, she might think it was, she'd totally buy it. And someone's response, which I think was apt, was, "Looks like Hollywood is going to have to start making movies that people want to see,"
Yep. Yep.
which
Absolutely
I
gonna
think is a
happen.
wonderful part
Yeah,
of
I
AI.
saw I saw another one that was really fun. It was a takeoff on Lord of the Rings, right? And the two hobbits get on top of the two eagles, and they just fly over the volcano and drop.
Right?
What do we have to go through all this crap, you know?
Tolkien's kicking us in his grave.
Yeah.
It is. I do sometimes wonder, like, do we have too much information though, to the point where it almost becomes impossible to make a decision? And is AI going to um, help or hurt with that? Because as we're getting more and more information and more readily available, I feel like we're going to get to a point where um, it's not meaningless, but it's almost meaningless in the sense that people are they don't have the processing power for everything that they've been told, all the information they have, and to do that on top of their regular life, it'll just kind of further decouple them from reality.
Yeah, but see, this is what you said is on top of their regular lives. Okay, I think we need to stay in our regular lives. There's a thing called
Yeah.
the Dunbar number. I don't know if you've heard about that. There was this
Mm.
English anthropologist called Robin Dunbar, and he figured out that um, basically we have the capacity to remember about 150 people, faces,
Mm.
stuff like that. A large
Yeah.
hunting gathering band, all right?
Right.
Um, and uh, and it's within that number, within the Dunbar number, that everything important happens. Again, the boss you love, the boss you hate, the woman you want to marry, the crazy person who's, stalking you, whatever, happiness, misery happens in the Dunbar number, which is your street. If it's safe, is it not? Your workplace, is it interesting? Is it crushing? All those things aggregate into real life. Now, all those decisions you're talking about, yeah, important decisions, who to vote for and stuff like that. But in the end, you need to live inside the Dunbar number more. And the difficulty is um, that the internet makes Donald Trump feel like he's in my Dunbar number, right? He's right there.
Right.
He's
Yeah.
I can talk to him. So, I mean, I'm talking to you. You're not in my Dunbar number, but now you are, right?
Right.
So this
Right.
is all the time. So there's this tremendous confusion. I think we need to kind of blink a couple of times real hard and realize, there's no place like home. It's a fallacy that we need to have all this information. Most of it is just stuff. It's just stuff.
Mm.
As what's his name? Enan Taleb says,
Hmm.
the majority of what we call information that has exploded with the internet is noise, right? So I actually feel like that's not a bad thing. The majority of information probably always has been noise, but in our Dunbar number lives, the structure is such that we weed it out real quick because we know, you
Hmm.
know, I know who my wife is, and I know what that means for me. For example, if I meet a woman in a bar, I said, "Well, sorry, this is not me. I'm married." So
Yeah.
the pathways pretty well, right? They've been kind of dug out for you. I think once you raise yourself above to the, say, national level or to the global level with the internet, it's just hard to tell what's what, right? And sometimes the standards are crazy. My friend Andre Meir that says, it has become such that the person that provides the information determines the value of information. So two
Mm,
plus two equals four, unless it's said by Hitler. If Hitler said it, it's probably a lie, right? So,
right.
uh, so,
Right.
so, um, so you gotta go like, so who is talking? What is their value of information? In the end, and you drift into what I and others have called post-truth, and many bemoan that. I actually think it's not a bad thing if people take it the way that they should, which is everything has to be taken with from a skeptical position. Number one.
Mm,
Number two, as a former, almost I was a media analyst, which descends directly from propaganda analysis. Um, there is no piece of information that is not full of interesting stuff. All right, and fake news, for example, is full of information. You can glean a lot about fake news, the way you could about propaganda. And the most interesting part about fake news is the fake part, right? Because the true part, you go, well, okay, that's true. But the fake part, you ask, why are they saying that? Why are they saying it that way? Who is behind it?
right.
What did they think was going to happen by saying that way? Who was the intended audience? Did they reach it? And you can get such a rich set of information just from parsing fake news. So we have to teach our kids this. We have to teach them to try and, because two plus two, when said by Hitler, is false. And we have to kind of look at information from us, not just from our own perspective or our tribal perspective, or but what? Why did Hitler say that? Why did go around 360 degrees? Nobody can do that, of course, fully, but as much as a single human brain can go around the same bit of information and see the different perspectives. I always say, I believe in truth. All right. I mean, I am not a postmodernist. If a big rig is coming at me in the middle of the road, I'm jumping out of the way. I'm not gonna.
Right.
I can't deconstruct it in time, right? Um, but look, I mean, go to New York City, climb to the top of the Empire State Building, look out at night. It looks like the heavenly city. It looks like it's
Yeah.
gorgeous. It's magnificent. It's literally breathtaking. Climb all the way down to the sidewalk. There may be a homeless person, shooting up on the sidewalk, and cars honking, and all kinds of things. And it looks like, the third circle of hell. And it's the same New York. It's the same
Yeah.
truth from two different perspectives. You need to go around and see the same thing from different perspectives.
I feel like there's a degree of abdication that's happened that social media has enabled, that kind of plays into the cowardice is maybe not the right word, but the cowardice of many people to not want to handle the situations in front of them, and to instead think that the really important thing for me to do is to be tweeting at President Trump about how he's wrong about this certain policy issue, or this influencer is wrong about his take, when generally the things that are in front of you are much A, more important, and B, more boring, and that's generally why we tend to look to Twitter, as opposed to looking down the street, because it's harder to
Or even
fix the world right in front of you.
or even look in the mirror, right? I always love these
Yeah.
people. These people who you look at them and they want to save the earth, and you look at them and say, okay, lose 10 pounds. Start with
Right.
start with showing that you have the wherewithal to change yourself before you start
Yes.
telling me you're going
Yeah.
to save the earth, right? Somebody like Greta Thunberg, who openly admits that she went into saving the earth as personal therapy because her emotional, isolation was so terrible, and she
Yeah.
broke through it with all this activism. Well, I don't want to be anybody's therapist in that regard.
Yeah.
You can't save the earth. It's hard enough, if you eat too much, or, if you can't motivate yourself to do certain things. That's a struggle, all right? And to think
Right.
you can save the world, or you can strike a pose and pretend to save the world. I don't know what happens here. I feel like I'm not sure I could save myself, you know? I mean, so it's half the time, you know, the struggle is with you. Whatever principles,
Yeah.
whatever principles you have, the big struggle is not with the world or with the human race or with President Trump or anything like that. The biggest struggle is with the person in the mirror, into trying to make that person the story inside your head of what it should be, you know? And that's hard, and you never ever succeed. You can inch towards perfection, but you never get there.
Yeah. It is. I I think that Tucker Carlson said this well in his speech at Charlie Kirk's memorial, and he said the only change that matters is the one that begins with you, and me recognizing that you are the problem that needs to be solved first.
Right.
But that is tremendously more boring and humbling than solving the world's problems. Because if you solve the world's problems, then everyone's looking at you. If you solve your own problems, pretty much like very few people are. Perhaps no one is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's again, it's the dumber number going crazy a little bit. You know, you're leaping to the universal from the personal because you have this sense through the internet and Zoom and AI that you live in the universal, but you don't. You live in the dumber number. You live there,
Yeah.
and the most important person in the dumber number is you. And so, if you want to change things, start there and find out how hard it is. You know how hard it is. You wouldn't be saving the earth if you didn't know how hard saving yourself is, right? It is
Yes.
cowardice of a sense. It's certainly avoidance of a sense.
Yeah, that's a better word. Yeah. How I also have a question about the people who are using this moment where everyone's kind of decoupling from each other, and from the regime as a whole, to ask about the people who are just taking it as a moment to kind of destroy everything they can. And right, their motto is let's burn it all to the ground. Um, is that something that is just a stepping stone that we always go through during regime changes and have in the past, where we just kind of want to burn it all to the ground, but then cooler heads prevail and we say no, let's change it here and here and here, but we don't need to burn everything.
Well, that is my hope. There's no law that says that, you know, uh, the the theme again of Fukuyama's book was that there's no ideology that can replace liberal democracy, that we've reached, the end of history, in the sense that no ideological developments can beat what liberal democracy can be. And I think he's right about that. I mean, the book was written 40 years ago and nothing has arisen. We haven't had, in the in the 20th century, some weird ideology after another kept popping up, right? The 21st, the digital era has been very sterile in ideologies, and that is a good thing, believe me. But you can have barbarism, the barbarians, the Vandals and the Goths that overran the Roman Empire didn't come in with, oh, you guys have your ideology, we got ours. No, they just came in, occupy what was there already, didn't know how to use it, so all felt to hell, right? And
Right.
that is the peril for us today. It's not some rival ideology taking over, which I don't think, by the way, Fukuyama foresaw, except insofar as he talked about the last meeting. Um, it's the peril of barbarism, of people who are just enjoying what these complicated systems, interlocking systems, have produced, but have no idea how to sustain them, and hate their position within those systems enough to want to destroy them.
Yeah.
There are structural reasons, unfortunately, in our particular moment, why that happens more than before. Basically, the public is very fractured. I think it always has been. The mass audience is a myth that the
Hmm.
industrial age kind of imposed, right? Um, the mass audience that I was a part of. I'm an old guy. It was kind of looking at this gigantic mirror, this enormous thing, and we were all reflected there. And it was kind of good. You were there, I was there, my family, everybody was. We were all part of the mass audience, right?
Yeah.
The digital dispensation is like that mirror has fallen and shattered, right? And the public is living in little different pieces. So if you want to be against, for example, if you were against Hosni Mubarak, everybody unites. Everybody unites. We hate this together. But if you said, well, what's going to replace Hosni Mubarak? What is our ideology, our counter ideology to this dictator? All right. And you would then have the crowd in Tahrir Square, which was, oh, they had socialists, they had capitalists, they had, agnostics, they had normal Muslims, they had the Muslim Brotherhood. If you had
Yeah.
told them, if you had told them now come up with what comes next, they would start fighting with each other. But they unified and mobilized against, and you push that hard enough, you get nihilism.
I think there's unfortunately quite a lot of nihilism, but when did that nihilism start? Did that kind of rise with Homo informaticus? I don't know, the public was starting to see the regime and see what was happening, and
I
it
think
was too much for him.
it was the internet. It was 100. That was 100% the internet. That was
Yeah,
basically the internet allowed the public to be what it had been before the mass organization of society during the industrial age, which is very scattered. That's really bad. It's just scattered,
yeah,
and so we were restored to our previous condition. Right, we were a bunch of little churches and not one gigantic, thing under the Pope. Um, so again, and that came with a lot of anger. And that's a long story to get into. I'm not sure I even have an answer for it. But it came with a lot of anger, right? And the anger crystallized in opposition and against, in the end, a sense of nihilism, of battering down. Before you build anything, you have to tear it all down. That kind of an attitude. The belief that destruction is a form of progress. That's my definition of nihilism. And there's a lot of people,
mm,
whether they're aware of it or not, that, work in that direction.
yeah. Is as I think you had a good point, which was we can't build or create a new regime just out of the things that we hate, right? You know, they hated Hosni Mubarak,
Yeah.
but you have to have something positive that you're working towards. I feel like, um, is that correct? That you can't just build a long lasting regime out of a negative?
Well, I mean, you can overthrow a regime out of a negative, but they overthrew Mubarak, but then you kind of give up the game, right?
Yeah,
I mean, the Tahrir crowd went home, and what you got was a democracy that lasted one election because the guy they elected was the Muslim Brotherhood, right? And so the army
right,
said, no, that's not going to
right.
happen. So they kicked him out. So they have a system now that's almost identical to what they had when Hosni Mubarak was president, which is the military in charge. It has not changed. So the only way you can counteract that is with institutions. And we're in an anti-institutional,
Mm,
an institution destroying moment in history, right? So in the olden days, there would have been some radical party that in its own way was like a tiny little bureaucracy with a boss, think of the Bolsheviks, for example, right? Where I won't say that Lenin was an absolute tyrant over the Bolshevik, Politburo before they took power. Um, but he was the man, right? He was the guy. And so when they took over, they had a hierarchy that they could then just inflate to whatever dimensions they wanted to. Tahrir Square, the Yellow Vests, most of these outbursts, the Catalans, the Hong Kong, they're just basically trying to either stop something or destroy something, and have no positive equivalent to put in its place.
mm.
So
I think part of the reason that the institutions, like we are at a point where everyone hates the institutions, is because the institutions were part of the regime. I think I'm using Curtis Yarvin's definition of regime here, which is just all the powers that create the justifying story and uphold it. And many of the institutions were part of the regime that got exposed throughout the last 25 years or so. And so everyone has kind of turned against institutions as an authority because the institutions that they saw were not worth having around.
Right, right. And I think there was a lot of truth in that. I think the institutions worked at the height of the industrial era, where there was a sync between uh, power, communications, economics, production. All those things were more or less in sync. Right now, all of that is kind of flying off, right? And
Hmm.
you basically um, you have at a very basic level a public that moves at the speed of light, right? I mean, we move at the speed of light. Uh, we're talking simultaneously, even though we're far apart. Um, and institutions that are just these plodding pyramidal things that barely inch forward, right? So, and at a very basic level, you're asking if I can get myself X, Y, or Z from Amazon on my doorstep in 2 days. Why does it take me 3 months or 3 years or whatever to get this permit from the freaking government of people that I have elected? I mean,
Right.
I didn't even elect Amazon, all right? So,
Right.
so I think there's that initial disconnect about what is the capabilities of the digital universe. Now I consider AI to be an extension of the digital age. Um,
Yeah.
the public knows what you can do with this. Government, believe me, there's just something about these industrial age institutions that, with the best will in the world, they always kept telling us, go out there and embrace the internet. But they just kind of, what you embrace were your own preconceptions, right? You built things that gave you the answers you wanted to. I mean, it was what they tried to somehow create, much like, for example, many elites today um, want to turn the internet into like the front page of the New York Times, say around 1958 or something. It's like, I don't like all this stuff. Make it make sense like the old days. And from the public's perspective, we're dealing with a blizzard. We're dealing with this tsunami of information. We have to. We have no option. If you're up in the stratosphere of the elite world, you can have people that deal with that for you, all right? And you can pretend. And to get back to the example of John Kennedy, you can do a lot of bad things and get away with it in the old world, all right?
Yeah.
And they miss that. They want to be able to do a lot of bad things and get away with it.
Yeah.
It's probably been the way of the world. I think our particular elite class is worse than any I could think of, but bad things have always happened. All right. Um,
Yeah.
so, and the difference is now you can't get away. For God's sakes, you get like a million documents with this crazy Epstein thing. And then the public goes
Yeah.
double crazy, and I will been asked to write about this several times. It's like, I wouldn't touch that one with a 100-foot pole. All right. I mean, a plague on Epstein and everything he stands for. I get it. It's the corruption of the elites. Once you said that, you said it all. Let's move on.
Yeah.
But in the olden days, something like that would never have happened.
No, it wouldn't. And I mean, I'm a Christian, and so I put the blame for this not on necessarily their elitism, but just on the fact that they're humans. And I believe that Job says man is born to trouble as the sparks fly upwards. The Bible is pretty clear that we're not inherently good, but we are rather inherently sinful. And if we have access to power and the ability to create secrecy around our misdeeds, then we'll absolutely jump at that every time. And so, but I feel like delving into and you know pouring over the particular sins of the elite class or really any other class isn't probably the best use of your time. I feel like there are better things to be doing. You should be building something as opposed, like, it can be kind of just a sadism or I forget what the other word is, but just the kind of the pleasure in other people's suffering or in their depravity.
Schadenfreude, right? Um,
Yeah,
basically, I there's a lot of avoidance in this, and a lot of, and I think that's our age at its worst. Honestly, I believe, and I think many people would agree that when you see somebody who's superior to you, right, the proper response is admiration, right? You wish you could
yeah,
be, you wish you could be as they were or as they are in whatever makes them superior, right? Whether it's, hitting a baseball, you're Juan Soto, uh, and or maybe it's just morally superior. These are people who are above temptation or whatever. I mean, you always, but I think our age, it's resentment is what you get. If you're superior, you're resented. You have no right to be superior. We're supposed to all be identical in some unfathomable way.
yeah.
And that's morally, I think, as well as in other ways, and talent-wise.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that envy is the sin of the age,
Yeah,
especially exacerbated by social media.
yeah,
We look at the elites and we think, well, I'm better than them.
yeah.
I deserve it more. And we want to tear it away from their fingers and keep it ourselves. In many ways, the Lord of the Rings lives on through us, and we are
Yes.
all, there's a little golem inside all of us.
Yep.
But I would put the solution to that not as admiration, find the right earthly leader to admire, but look to Christ, who is perfect, and where you see his image and where you see people portraying him accurately on earth, then you can admire them, and you should admire them, and you should try to be like those people. We really do have, there are people that are elites for a reason because they are just, they've worked hard, they have uh, you know been virtuous, they've done the right things, they've taken on the hard challenges, and we should look to them in hope and admiration, but you cannot rely on them for salvation. You must ultimately look to Christ. He's the only one who can fulfill the archetype of the perfect man to look forward to.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not religious, but we all have ideals, and you can put Christ in that slot. But in the end, honestly, as human beings, and here we are all humans,
Yeah,
you need models of that ideal. In other words, what does that even mean, right? Okay, you look at
you do.
individuals who seem to model that idea in different ways, very admirably, and you imitate them. I mean, it really is that's growing up, is looking at people around and saying,
Right.
"Oh, this person, usually it's your dad or your mom, but then there are friends, and then there are teachers. There are all kinds of, you adopt, people who are modeling the virtues for you, right?
Yeah.
And that is, it's at least somebody asked Thomas Jefferson, what did you mean by the pursuit of happiness? This is a phrase that gets so misinterpreted. He said, he kind of blinked. It was written, but you could hear him blink, all right? And said, it's the pursuit of virtue. And he didn't say
Right.
stupid. He didn't say stupid, but you could tell he was thinking it. It's the pursuit of virtue. I mean, basically, and that takes us back full circle to what we said before, which is look at the person in the mirror, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
try to make that the best likeness to the story in your head about yourself that you can. It's hard, and
It is.
it's easier to throw mud at others.
It definitely is, and as are the people we've tried to imitate have become farther and farther away from us. They're no longer our parents or our teachers or our boss or whatever it is. They're generally people on social media. I mean, you don't see the humanity of them, and so I don't know, it can be kind of despairing as you look at, a little bit hopeless, like look how perfect they are, because you don't see, they're not real people over social media. You only see the best bits of them. And so I think that returning to admiration and the pursuit of being like the people in your circle who you have direct connection with, I think that's a a wonderful place to start, and honestly should be the place everyone starts.
Yeah, I mean, but the culture determines a lot. Okay, the framework determines a
It
lot.
does.
You see an old movie called Young Edison, right? And it's
Mm.
about literally that is the young genius. What's the name of the actor? I forget now. But it's a young genius uh, in a very poor, lower middle class context, and nobody thought he was anything, and he got slammed in the ear and lost his hearing. All kinds of things happened to him. But it's all about if you are this persistent person. Of course, that was Edison was famous for his persistence, right? He got
Yeah.
right filament after trying hundreds. You know, if you're a
Yeah.
persistent person, you too can achieve things. Now take the social network. And I mean, okay, I'll get back to that, but take the social network. We're shown Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg is an asshole, okay? And he's portrayed as one, and he stumbled into this thing, and anybody could have done it. And he just got to try to cheat his partners, and there are all these bad, silly things. And so, okay, the reality is both of these people were inventors. Both were jerks.
Yeah.
Edison was a jerk.
It was a jerk. Yeah.
But the culture just chose not to pay attention to that part of it. There's lots of jerks out there, but there was only one Edison, all right? And there's lots of jerks out there, but there's only one guy who invented a system of communication that had billions of people. It never happened before in the history of the human race.
Yeah.
So it all depends on what the culture tells you should be paying attention to: the jerk or the genius.
Yeah. Yep. No, absolutely. I think that we're all dealing with humans at the end of the day, and humans are very complex, and they're not perfect. And most of the time, like Elon Musk has done a lot of good for the world. He has also had so many children with so many different women. It's hard to keep track at this point, and I would consider that not his greatest achievement. But we're flawed characters, and the goal should be to become as unflawed of a character yourself as you can. I think
Or certainly to be aware of
it's
your own
difficult enough.
be aware of your own faults
Yes.
enough that you don't find any pleasure in flinging mud at others.
Yes, yes. The Bible, judge not lest ye be judged. For the standard by which you judge, you shall be judged. So, absolutely. Martin, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm sure we could talk for much longer.
Yeah,
There's so much more to talk about for the regime and everything. Where can people find your book, Revolt of the Public, and yourself online?
Yeah, Amazon, and yeah, I basically I'm pretty easy to find online. All the way through to you probably think of my emails all over the place. So just Google me up, you can find me.
Fantastic. I will. I'll put the link to the book in the description, and I'll put your Twitter in there as well. You occasionally tweet quite a lot about Cuba,
Yes,
but they need it
lately.
at this moment. So
Lately, yeah.
yes, yeah. There you go, Martin. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Great, Jackson. Thanks for having me.
See you guys.
All right.